This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit casper.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have another Take Control author with us this time with, well, sort of a different kind of book because he's been here before to talk about the book when it was a pre-book. Now it's a real book, and so we're going to talk to him about the real book and the pre-book. Got it? Good. Michael Cohen, the author of Take Control of Pages. Michael, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Chuck. Yes, it's just like Pinocchio. It's now a real grown-up book.
I think I confused myself with that intro. So let me try to summarize where we've been and where we're going. You all decided you and Adam and Tanya, Take Control Books, decided to publish Take Control of Pages as a pre-book. So you were kind of doing one chapter at a time, if I remember correctly?
Something like that. The idea was that in late fall of 2013, Apple released a brand new version of Pages, which completely cut all contact with the previous version. It was an entirely new program, missing a huge number of features. And so Adam and Tanya and I said, well, Apple has promised to be adding a lot of stuff in the coming year. So it would be kind of crazy, to try to write a book and cover it as it keeps changing under us while we go. And I said, well, I would have to sort of do that anyway because it's a big thing. I said, but let's think about writing the core of the book and then updating that and adding chapters as we go along and as Pages mutates into maybe not its final form, but a more developed form. And so we decided the idea would be a pre-book, sort of like an advanced reading copy. And the first one that came out had the basic how to get it installed, and then a big chapter called Where Is Everything, aimed at people who have used word processors before and used Pages before and needed to know simple things like, well, where do I go to set fonts in this beast? Where do I go to set paragraph formats or styles? And so that's all covered in the big Where Is Everything chapter. And then every 6 weeks or so, I would write another chapter or two, and it would go through the editorial and production process, and the book would be expanded, and it would also cover all the changes that Apple had folded into Pages in the meantime. And at almost every single update, they had done at least one or possibly two since the previous installment of the book. So I was both rewriting the stuff that I had and adding new material every 6 weeks. And we finally, it's been a year in the making, I finally finished the book covering all the material I wanted to cover. So now it's coming out in version 1.0. And it's now a full grown-up book with all the parts in place.
And a year in the making, Michael. That's
Yes.
It's because Take Control books. I mean, usually, and I don't mean this as a criticism. It's a little more fleet of foot. But you're right. The rewrite of Pages was a big deal. It confused a lot of people, along with Keynote. But that's a whole other story in another book. And so I guess at the end of a year, how do you feel that Pages stacks up to maybe where it was and to its competition?
Well, it's kind of hard to talk about its competition in one sense because if you bought a Mac anywhere in the last year or so, or bought an iOS device anywhere in the last year or so, it's a free program from Apple. You don't pay anything for it. So there aren't that many full-featured word processors or like Numbers, spreadsheets, or like Keynote presentation packages that richly developed available for free. So it's kind of like not really got competition in one sense. There are other products in the same genre that it does, go up against. It's not Microsoft Word. It's not going to give all the bells and whistles and business-friendly features and things that Microsoft Word does. It's not a Nicest Writer Pro, which is, infinitely, extendable with macros and like that. On the other hand, just as a good word processor and a simple layout program for someone like my mother to use, it's lovely. It's still missing some features that it should have had. that it lost when it went from pages 4 to pages 5, like linked text boxes are a big deal. You can't link them anymore, although they've got enough of the interface that it looks like that may be coming eventually, but it's not there now. And there's a few other things missing, and there's odd little bugs and quirks, but generally for what you get, it's a really solid, usable program, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to, let's say, a student going away to school, to college, to somebody who has to write, letters or, simple forms. Somebody who even has to work with people who write reports in Word, because it can import and export Word just fine. So it stacks up pretty well.
I think you just compared me to your mother. I'm not sure. Which may be a compliment, actually, depending on how you look at it.
She's kind of geeky for a woman of 85.
Gee, I can't imagine why. I've used Pages. I like Pages. I haven't tackled major projects with Pages. On the other hand, there are not that many major projects I do anymore on paper. Mm-hmm. So it is a kind of a strange situation that, yes, if you are a heavy-duty, serious graphic designer who's doing things, maybe it may not be for you. Mm-hmm. But it would, at least from where I sit, I think maybe it needs to be sold up a little bit, that it can do an awful lot of things for an awful lot of people with a lot lower learning curve.
It has some surprising depth to it. One case in point is like graphic objects is simple. You can put a rectangle on the page, or a dialogue balloon or arrows and like that. You've got a little gallery of them, drag and drop, and there you go. But when you dive into it, you realize those things are infinitely editable. You can turn any shape into any other shape. You can change the points on the curve. You can add control points. It becomes almost a full-blown graphic design program in that sense, and it's not obvious, but that's all there. It's got things like, in the word processing, it's got something called list styles, which are different than paragraph styles. In word processing, like Word or in Pages, you'd take a paragraph, you'd say, I want a paragraph with this indentation, bold text, and this font, this line spacing. You make that a style, you can apply it to any other paragraph. List styles are like that, but they're only for things that are part of a numbered or a bulleted list. And those styles sit on top of a paragraph style. So I can have a paragraph style in whatever form I like. Apply a list style to it to make it part of a list. Remove the list style from it, it becomes that paragraph with the same formatting it had before. Because list styles and paragraph styles are now different. And it seems trivial, but that's actually a very powerful feature, and one that I hadn't really been aware of before. Maybe other word processors do it, but I'd never encountered it before. It's only because I actually had to write about it and explain how it worked. And I said, oh, well, this is interesting.
And I guess that's where, because I have to take it back. I did, now that I think about it, I did do what for me is a pretty major project not long ago, a booklet that we put together at the office for an event. And it ended up being 75, 80 pages, which, and there were a lot of formatting things and a lot of different things because I was trying to match something else from another designer. And Pages was up to the task. There were very few things that I had to kind of tweak around and figure out a way to do. It was more, okay, where's the feature? What am I trying to accomplish? And, oh, here it is. And this is how it can work here. And
that's why I named that big chapter, Where is Everything? Because you know what you want to do. You just need to know, where do I find it?
Right. So other than Where is Everything, what are some of the other chapters? Because again, and we're joking about it, but you took a year to write this book. So that means you went in depth, and I love that.
Well, let's see. There's a whole chapter dedicated to styles. There are character styles. There are paragraph styles. There are also object styles. Like if you say, drag one of those rectangles off of the shapes menu, and you tweak, you get a different fill color, fiddle with the border and like that, you can save that as an object style and apply that same style to any other shapes that you drag off of the shapes palette. So I have to covered object styles as well as character styles and paragraph styles and list styles, which is covered in the chapter about getting organized. Because that also covers things like sections, dividing a document into sections, building a table of contents for a document. So I have a chapter just on that. Let's see, what else have I got in there? I actually have to look at the table of contents. There's a chapter on layout, things like, page layout, creating columns, laying out objects on the page with things like guides and rulers and the things you can do. And there's some surprisingly useful things like guides for when you drag shapes around. They'll tell you relatively how close one is to another and help you align them. They appear and disappear, and they're all very nice. So you've got that to deal with as well. So I've got that in the layouts chapter. Then there's placeholders, where you're creating a template that you're going to use a bunch of times. So you can create text and image media placeholders, create the document, save that as a template, and then when you use that template, you just click on the placeholder and instantly replace what you had as filler. So I dealt with that as well. Then I got into objects, because all of this is about adding objects to the page other than just text. And you've got your shapes, you've got lines, you've got connecting lines, like the lines that will connect one shape to another and change as you move objects around that they're connected to. There are complex objects like tables and charts, and the tables are like numbers, spreadsheets. So you can actually stick a number-style spreadsheet in a Pages document that does calculations for you and works just like a number spreadsheet would. And then you can have charts, pie charts, scatter plot charts, bar charts. All the charts that you would see in Numbers are available in Pages. And I talk about how to lay those in and how to format those as well.
Michael, before you go on, go back a second to...
Yes, the eyes begin to glaze over, don't they, Chuck?
No. I want to make sure we got it, though. When you were talking about the connecting lines and changing shapes and all, are you talking about the kind of thing that maybe if you were designing an org chart and wanted to move somebody?
Exactly that sort of thing.
Okay.
You could drag a text box into a document and say, President of the company. Drag another couple of boxes, Executive Vice President, of Sales, Executive Vice President of Whoopee. You want to draw connecting lines between them, you can actually drag these lines, make it a connecting line, so if you move those boxes around, the lines follow.
If I have a choice of those two positions, I know which one I'll take.
Of course, so would I.
Yeah. Anyway, that's one we haven't done on the show before.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You keep on going.
I'm almost done with the catalog of chapters. It's like the catalog of ships in the Odyssey, isn't it? There's a chapter on templates, how to create them, how to use them, what kind of templates there are, and how to make your own, of course. There's a chapter on collaboration, because Pages has a lot of collaborative capabilities built in. There's share menus in every version of Pages, and Pages for Mac, Pages for iOS, Pages for iCloud, all have share menus so you can share documents with others. And you can either share them by making a copy, sticking a password on it, or not, as you choose, and emailing it, or sending it through AirDrop, or sending it through Twitter, almost any way you want to go. And then there's iCloud sharing. And that's when you store a document in iCloud that you own, and you send out invitations to others. And anybody who has a web browser, a recent version of Safari, or Windows Explorer for that matter on Windows, can open up your Pages document and edit it in real time at the same time that you are. And you will see both workers going on together, or 3 or 4 or more, with their cursors all color-coded. You've got a little menu that shows you who's doing what. So you can do some really collaborative writing in real time without actually owning a copy of Pages.
Michael, as you go through that, at the outset, we said this is a word processor.
Right.
And yet about, a hefty percentage of what you just described, I think of as more of a page layout program. And so
Pages always was. Don't forget, its name is Pages. It's not Word.
Right. And that's where I'm going. What should people consider this application? Is it more of a mid-level mid-level page layout program? Is it more of a mid-level word processor? Is it mid-level both?
It's more like mid-level both. Pages used to have something called layout mode, and there were different templates for layout and for word processing documents. There were two modes. And Pages 4 and earlier differentiated among them in a major way. Pages 5 doesn't do it that way, but that doesn't mean that layout documents are gone. Every template that you get comes in as what we used to call a word processing document. However, every document also comes in with a little something on its document setup inspector, little checkbox that says body text. That comes in checked. If you uncheck it, anything that is body text, that's text that flows from page to page to page, it all goes away. And suddenly you've got a layout program in which you stick text boxes on the page, you stick images on the page, you stick diagrams, graphics on the page, or video for that matter, and position it however you want it to look and go from page to page that way as a layout program, as you would do in a layout program. You no longer have that flowing body text. So that you can make any document into a layout document, or turn on the body text and stick body text in, and you've got a word processing document again.
And that's where I think your book is invaluable, and I think Pages is invaluable. I see people at the office and elsewhere take a copy of Microsoft Word and they try to turn it into a page layout program. Because
all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly. And it's like, I plead with them, please don't do that. Please don't open Word again in front of me. It hurts my soul, unless you're going to write a letter, to see you trying to manipulate this stuff with different invisible tables and everything to manipulate things to where you want. Get the right tool for the job if that's what you're doing. And
Pages is really very good with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, on iOS, it's almost an addictive tactile experience, because you move stuff around with your fingers. So, I want to rotate this picture. Well, there's no little rotate control off on the side like you'd have on the Mac. You just grab it with your fingers, go, and you want to make it bigger, you just stretch it with your fingers. It's strangely satisfying to do that.
And thank you, because that's another place I want to make sure we went, is take control of Pages for the Mac and the iOS version, or heavily one, a little bit the other?
Oh, no, I went insane on this one. It covers, and that's one of the reasons it took so long, because I decided it would be interesting to cover Pages on Mac, Pages on iOS, and Pages in a web browser, Pages for iCloud. Those are actually 3 separate apps, actually 4, because Pages on the iPhone differ slightly from Pages on the iPad, even though it's the same application. It behaves differently on the 2 devices. So I actually documented, I guess you'd say 3.5 different apps: the Mac app, the iPad app, the iPhone app, and the web app. And every single chapter, every single topic, if a feature that I'm describing is available on all of them, I discuss it on all of them. And here's how you do it on this device. Here's how you do it on that device, but you might not have this feature. On this device, you don't have that feature, but you have this one instead. So I had to write about all the versions at the same time. That was challenging.
Yeah, I would think so.
And that's another reason it took a year, and that's another reason it's 266 pages long.
Yeah. Michael, again, that was a criticism we saw before, that, and I guess my personal feelings have changed a little bit on this, because there's not feature parity across every device and the web. And no, at some point I felt like that was a really, really bad thing. And I'm still not sure it's not so good in some places, but I found that I'm adapting to the idea that there's some things that are just better done on a particular platform, as opposed to trying to do everything everywhere anytime.
Well, I look at it like this. If you want to use Pages profitably, you should probably be using it on all 3 platforms at one time or another. And iCloud is the glue that holds it all together. Put a pin in that, by the way. We want to talk about iCloud next,
Okay.
because that's important. But the fact is, if you're going to be doing a very complex document, you would start off on the Mac. No question, that's the one that's most feature rich. But once you've got the basics of the document laid out, the styles in place, and you need to be developing content, you can switch to the iPad or the iPhone or even the web browser version to put content into it. Because no matter which platform you're on, and this is one of the reasons Pages changed, by the way, between 4 and 5, Pages preserves all the settings you make, even if the platform you're working on doesn't support that feature. So if I use some strange font on the Mac side that's not on the iPad, it will show up on the iPad in Helvetica, but if you look at the font list, it says Helvetica and then in parentheses, the real name of the font. It remembers, it knows what font that is. You get back to the Mac, the font is back. It doesn't lose anything. Whether you're going from iCloud to iPad to the Mac to the iPhone and back, your Pages document through iCloud remains intact. That's the big difference between 4 and 5. That's one of the reasons they rebuilt it from the ground up, so that via iCloud, a document could migrate to any one of the Pages apps and not lose formatting information.
So why don't we just make it simple and have everything everywhere all the time, including fonts?
Because you can have fonts that go back for hundreds of generations of the Mac, hundreds of years, that just aren't available in the iPad form. There are also licensing issues involved. There's a whole lot of other reasons why some things are just hard to do. Some things they haven't quite figured out how to do, or the best way to do it. Remember when the iPhone first came out and you didn't even have cut and paste? It took an Apple a year to come up with a method for cut and paste that they could live with going on into the future. It wasn't a matter of implementing cutting text and pasting it, but coming up with the right interface that wouldn't paint them into a corner 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 5 years down the road. In an app like Pages, it plays on multiple platforms. It's often that same question. We know how to do this computationally inside the code on the iPad, but we haven't figured out yet the right way to present it to the user. So we're not going to give them something that's half put together and be forced to live with that from that point on. We're going to wait. We're going to do it right. That's what Apple has always done. They've delayed stuff until they were happy with the way it looked and then unleashed it on the world.
Yeah, they play the long game in every way. And that's why I think we see a lot of delays from Apple at times. But
it can be infuriating because we all want our goodies now. We all want the shiny right now, everywhere, the way we want it. We want the future in our hands and we can pet it and love it.
Yeah. And you went exactly where I was trying to get you to go, but I didn't want to prompt you. And that is the licensing issues. Because that's another thing. You buy a license and we're back to, some of the things that cut across music and video and everything else, where you've licensed it just to use on this particular machine, sometimes in a particular document. And, so you just can't render it, just stick it over on the Mac. There are,
fonts, just like graphic images, just like videos, are intellectual property. They are created things. They're not just, the alphabet. Well, that's been around for millions of years. No, it's the design of the letters. Each one of those is a work of art. It's copyrightable. And yes, sometimes I can be upset when I see a font is $5,000 to license. And it can go as high as that. But at the same time, people put a lot of work into fonts. It's not easy to design a bunch of letters that work together and look good in a bunch of different sizes. Try it sometime.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think we overlook it, and then you buy, well, you can or could or still can, I guess, get the font discs of 1,000 fonts, and okay, they're great, and to the normal eye, they probably look okay. But number one, we're back to licensing, but they also don't print as crisply. They don't work as well. They're cheap knockoffs at times. There's sometimes, I'm sure, not even legal knockoffs. So, you have this issue. But I think, and I'm hoping there's somewhere in your book, that if you stick with some basic Apple fonts for your projects, that...
I do talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
The strategy being, that if you know you're going to be working a lot across platforms, stick with the ones that are there. But, if you have a need, you can do that, but be aware that this is going to happen. But the nice thing is, at least that Pages won't stab you in the back if you do.
Right.
In Pages 4, if you put a document in iCloud and brought it down on the iPad and edited it there, you'd lose style information when it got back to the Mac. In Pages 5, that doesn't happen. And the cost has been losing a lot of features and completely redesigning the interface and the file format and everything else. But Apple is playing the long game, and they're playing the long game with iCloud. And this is something, by the way, I also had to deal with in the course of writing this book. When I started, we had what was called documents and data in iCloud. Every app had its own little place in iCloud where it stored its stuff, and no other app could ever see it, and you could never really see it except from inside the app. And that's how Pages worked with iCloud until October, when Apple introduced iCloud Drive and Yosemite and iOS 8, and suddenly how you looked at and used iCloud completely changed. And iCloud is a fundamental part of the Pages experience. It really is designed to show off what you can do when documents live in the cloud and can travel from device to device seamlessly. But how you get to iCloud changed midway through the book, and I had to go back and refill and rewrite a bunch of stuff, shoot a bunch of new screenshots. Oh my goodness.
So I'm going to go there. We said we wanted to go back to the web version, but I think that iCloud Drive may be in there pitching somewhere. You tell me. But is iCloud Drive, the implementation of iCloud Drive with Pages, now a satisfactory, superior kind of experience, or is it still, you're still sort of struggling with it?
That's a really tough one to answer, because so much depends on who your internet service provider is and how good your connection is to the web.
Whoa, I didn't expect that answer.
Well, partly because if everything's working great and you've got a really, good internet feed and your devices are all happy talking to the internet at high speed, you make a change on one device and you step over to the other one and you open it up, the changes will have already migrated from your device to the iCloud Drive, and your next device that you open it up on will see all the changes ready to go. In reality, for most of us, you probably want to wait like 5 minutes or so to make sure everything gets in sync. Because, something else may be going on in your iPad. You may be having a bad web network connection because all your neighbors are watching Walking Dead and you're sharing a line from the cable company. So in reality, it's not completely seamless, but it's pretty darn close when you're switching from device to device. I've actually found it to be a heck of a godsend, and not just with Pages, with iCloud Drive generally. We were talking about PDF Pen before this conversation got started. And this weekend I had to look at the page proofs for the Pages book. And Tanya had prepared for me a PDF so I could read through it. And so I thought, well, I don't want to be standing in front of my computer, looking at this thing. So I loaded it into iCloud and opened it up on PDF Pen on my iPad, and I'm making comments as I'm going along, sitting on my sofa, also watching some football, as one does. And then, every few hours, I've done about 80 or so pages. I've got a bunch of little notes. I'd get up, walk to my Mac, open up PDF Pen Pro on my Mac. There's the same PDF with all the markup I'd done with PDF Pen on my iPad, sitting there for me to look at, so I could open up the manuscript file and make the changes that I'd marked up. And that was a pretty flawless experience. I was quite pleased with that. So iCloud Drive generally is great when it works, but like any form of plumbing, when the plumbing goes out, it's a nightmare. So it's only as good as your network pipes.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Casper, a better mattress for a better night's sleep. To find out more, try one for 100 days and get a $50 discount. Visit Casper.com/MacVoices. Casper makes mattresses. Casper makes great mattresses. Casper makes great mattresses at a great price. I'm about 2 weeks into my time with my Casper mattress, and if anything, I'm enjoying it more than the first couple of nights. The interesting thing is that I didn't have the usual acclimation period of getting used to a new mattress. You know that feeling. The first couple of days of vacation, you never sleep quite right because you're on a mattress that's too hard or too soft or just too something. I didn't have that with the Casper. It was comfortable when I laid down on it the very first time, and I've had nothing but great night's sleep since then. The combination latex foam and memory foam give it a feel that's soft yet firm. It's hard to describe until you experience it. And even though they combine the foam types to give you a great mattress, it isn't hot at all. It supports you where you need it and gives you the sleep you need. And it comes to you. No going out to the mattress specialty shop and laying down on several mattresses for a few minutes to try to figure out what fits. With Casper, you get 100 days. That's over 3 months to sleep on the mattress and decide you love it as much as I do. If you don't, no problem, but you will love it. I've shown you how it looks when it gets to you and how simple it is to unpack and set up. And now it's time for you to get your very own by going to Casper.com/MacVoices. When you do, you get to pick an American-made queen size for $850 or a king size for $950. And if you use the code MacVoices, and why wouldn't you can get $50 off of either of those or any other size you need. That's code MacVoices for $50 off your very own Casper mattress. I love my Casper mattress. Let me know that you do too. Chuck@MacVoices.com or @ChuckJoyner on Twitter, and tell me which one you got and how much fun you had setting it up. I really want to know. Casper.com/MacVoices and the code MacVoices for $50 off your very own Casper. Do it now. Thanks to Casper for their support of MacVoices. I want to be real clear here, because what you're describing is a bit of a linear transition from one device to another. Is there any syncing capability here? Say if you and I are, if I'm working on a document on my Mac and you're working on the same one on your iPad, are we just going to confuse the daylights out of things and lose stuff?
If you do it that way, yes. If you want to share a document in real time, you both want to be on the Mac in a browser or on a computer in a browser. And you can't do it on your iPad because iPad says, oh, you're going to iCloud? Here, let me open up the app for you. And that will get you nowhere. But if you're using Pages for iCloud in a browser on your Mac, and your friend is also using Pages for iCloud in a browser on her Mac, you're sharing that same document in iCloud and you're editing in real time. Her changes and your changes are happening as you look at them.
Got it.
And that works absolutely perfectly. As I described a little bit in the book, the two ways of sharing, one is sending a file, you work on it and send me back with all your changes in it. Because it does change tracking, just like Word does, only it does it actually rather visually more satisfying because it's Apple and you know they like things to be pretty. So that's one thing. If you've got a finished or almost finished project, you send somebody a file, they mark it up with comments, questions, suggestions, send it back to you, and then you incorporate. But if you're just creating something from scratch and you have collaborators, that's when you don't really care so much about the layout. You deal with the layout when you've got material to lay out. The first thing you have to do is get the material together. That usually means generating a lot of words. And so in that case, sharing a Pages document in real time where you can actually be both writing at the same time and also talking to one another through a phone or a Skype connection or, FaceTime or what have you, you can do collaborative writing at a distance very, very easily. And Pages works remarkably well for that.
I'm dying to get to the web, and we said we were going to do that. Well, you do that as a wrap-up, but you just went over something there that I hear so often.
This is the web. You're doing it through a browser.
Okay, so but go back to the change tracking, because right. That's one thing that I hear from the Word people, that nothing tracks changes as well as Word does, and
that continues to be true.
It is still true. It's prettier on Pages.
Pages will support all of the body text change tracking you do in a Word document when you import it into Pages, and will export the same way. Word can also track changes in other parts of a document as well, and Pages will not see those. It doesn't have corresponding. But if you're dealing primarily with body text, you can interchange between Word and Pages quite easily, and the change tracking carries along.
Okay, again, I want to make sure we hear that right. So if we're working just in the body text, and that's where we're making the edits on the PC, or excuse me, in Word, I forget the PC, but on Word, wherever, and on Pages for the Mac, that if you make a change in Word, send it to me, I open it in Pages, not only do I see the change, but I make a change in Pages, then send it back to Word,
you would be exporting it as a Word file, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
So everything stays intact. It continues to track everything.
I haven't seen it fail yet. I'm sure it could, because nothing's perfect. But it seems to be really reliable as far as I've been able to tell.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, I realize that some of the sharing descriptions you were doing were in the browser. How is the browser experience?
The browser, obviously, in terms of features, is, and this should not surprise anyone, is the weakest. It's a pared down set of Pages features. However, the interface looks very much like Pages on the Mac, with a little bit of the iOS version thrown in. And it does most of the basic stuff you need to do. And if you need to be exchanging a document to share it with somebody and do collaborative writing, it probably has all the stuff you need. It doesn't do everything quite the way you'd want it. For example, if you said, I want this pie chart to be in 3D, well, you do that on the Mac. Open it up in the browser, and that chart would look like it's in 2D, but it maintains the fact that it is in 3D, and it will be in 3D when it's back on the Mac again. You just won't see it in Pages for iCloud. You won't see the ability to create new styles in Pages for iCloud, but you can use every style that the document has already. So again, if you start with Pages on the Mac and create your basic shell, and then put it up on the web, you can start generating text for it and not worry too much about it. But you can't do everything. But again, it's not an unsatisfying experience at all, and it's surprisingly slick. And I can't believe when I'm actually using it, I say, this is a web browser? This is a word processor inside of a web browser? It blows my mind that you can do what it does at all.
As you talk about it, Michael, I get the impression that this is a very powerful program, but it does require a bit of relearning if you're a Pages user, and it requires just a little bit of recognition that this is that page layout / word processor, as opposed to one or the other that someone might be familiar with or might not be familiar with at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will take a lot of relearning because the interface changed radically from Pages 4 to Pages 5. There's no question about that. And then the interface itself is different between the Mac and the iOS version, which is a touch interface and does things in a very different way. Case in point, Pages on the Mac has a little sidebar called its inspector. And depending on what you select in the document you're working on, that inspector changes. If you're in text, you see the text format inspector. If you click on a shape, you'll see, the shape format inspector, that sort of thing. So it's context sensitive. On the iPad, you don't have any inspector floating off to the side because, the screen's a lot smaller, even smaller on the iPhone. Even if it's an iPhone 6 Plus, it's still smaller. So you don't want all that stuff in your face while you're working. That means you've got a little format icon you tap, then a popover appears with all these controls in there, and that's where you make some of your settings. But not all of them. Some of them may be just because you can do it with your fingers better than you can do it with a control off and a format inspector. And so Pages on the iPad may do it that way. Or you may tap something and a pop-up menu appears with some of the commands that were in the inspector on the Mac are in the menu that pops up from an object or a piece of text instead. So again, the question, where is everything, becomes a real one because you're working in three related but very different versions of the same application.
And I haven't spent the time with it that you have, but the time that I have spent with it, and also with Keynote and to a much lesser degree numbers, a lot of those metaphors, a lot of those tool sets, a lot of everything, they're consistent across all three applications. So if you're learning one, you're learning the others pretty much.
If you're learning one, you're learning the others in terms of capability and sometimes in terms of how they're implemented. But the touch interface and the mouse or the trackpad keyboard interface are very different ways of relating to information, physically relating to information. They require different user interface techniques. Trying to make them look identical would be really, really cumbersome in action. You want to play to each device's, each platform's strength. So Apple's had to thread a very interesting line here, what to make the same across platforms and what not to. And almost every decision they made, you could argue with one way or the other. I'm sure the arguments during the design sessions must have been intense and far-ranging, and I'm sure there was a lot of expletives exchanged at various points. But, speaking as someone who's had in his life to develop software, I know how hard it can be, to figure out how something will work when a user gets it. And I think Apple's done an incredible job in making an application like Pages or Numbers or Keynote, for that matter. I've actually played with all of them. Consistent across platforms while maintaining each platform's unique identity. It's really, I think Apple intends developers especially to look at something like Pages or Numbers or Keynote when thinking about how to do applications across platform, how to think about designing across platform. These are as much demonstration platforms as they are actual tools, the iWorks apps. This is Apple saying, you want to know how to do something? Well, here's a model you might want to follow. Take a look at how we did it here.
I don't think many of us have really thought about it exactly that way. It makes perfect sense, but that's not something that the end users are going to really think about.
No, the end user shouldn't have to think about it, but developers, they should think about it.
Okay, good point. Good point. So maybe go back and look at the Pages interfaces, and I say interfaces because of the different devices.
They are multiple.
Yeah, and appreciate them for what they are. And we could go off on an hour discussion on this, but I do think that it's something that we are starting to see, and maybe we're all starting to evolve our own thinking, that each of these devices, you play to their strengths, as you said earlier, and the interfaces need to play to their strengths. You cannot, it just doesn't make sense anymore to have everything unified across everything else, because on one device you've got a 4-inch screen, 5-inch screen. Another device you have
27 inches of retina.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a challenge, and it means that maybe we have to pay a little more attention to what we're doing, but on which device. But yeah, I like that idea. I like that idea. I think now I'm going to go and look at it through a different lens.
I've always been one of those people who likes to take things apart and see how they work and try to imagine why somebody did something the way they did it. It's not enough to say, well, this sucks, but I like to imagine, well, why does it suck, and why did they come to a decision to make it suck that way? Were they not paying attention, or were they trying to solve an entirely different question, answer an entirely different question? It helps to understand, the creator's point of view, or at least to try to imagine it.
And to bring this back full circle, what you said earlier, just the idea that everything had to be looked at, had to be redone, had to be redesigned. There are reasons for everything, and a lot of new metaphors. And of course, with iCloud Drive and the whole idea of sharing things back and forth, a lot of, okay, how is this going to work? So I think you're right. You have to ask the right question before you can really judge the answer.
Yeah. So, I am heartened by how well Pages has come along.
That's good to hear.
It doesn't have everything that I hoped it would eventually have, but it's only been a year, and Apple, likes to release things in bursts. And I have little doubt, that a few months down the line there'll be, Take Control of Pages 1.1 rolling in a whole bunch of changes between what's coming out in the next week or so and 6 months from now or 3 months from now.
And we've seen this with other things. We've seen it with Final Cut. We've seen it with iMovie. Whether you agree on all the decisions they made for those programs, as well as Pages, Numbers, and Keynote, there is a reasoning, there is a rationale behind it. and you have to look beyond version 1.0 of the rewrite to see where it's ultimately going, because there was so much, and they started again pretty much from the ground up and decided, okay, we're going to do it right for a new set of platforms.
Mm-hmm. I think behind so much of it is iCloud. And Tim Cook said a couple of years ago that iCloud is a strategy for the next decade. And Apple's applications and its operating systems are all playing into that in a big way. You know, it's not iCloud as a product, but iCloud is sort of the glue that holds all of your Apple devices together and makes them play with one another. Like a cloud, it's not actually anything you get your hands on, but everything's kind of moving through it.
Right. So 266 pages of,
yes.
of take control of pages goodness. And we've talked about all the topics, so I guess the only thing that's left to do is
I didn't mention the final chapter, which is about exporting stuff. We touched on that a bit, so we pretty much covered it. Except you can also make an ebook with pages.
Oh, you can? Like a real ebook or just a PDF kind of ebook?
No, an EPUB.
Oh, okay.
So it's an EPUB export. As I was working on the book and playing around with like the media objects, I said, well, why would you want to put a movie or a sound file in a document? The only way you could hear it is if somebody else opened that document in Pages. It doesn't appear in a PDF. The movie would be a single frame. The sound file would just vanish. So you can't print a movie. So what's the point? And then I realized, well, Pages does an EPUB export. And if you stick a movie in your text, that movie appears in your ebook as a playable movie. Or the sound file plays as a playable sound file. So you can do a sort of low-end multimedia ebook right within Pages.
Didn't know about that capability.
It's kind of slick. I mean, if you want to do something that's really highly formatted, like, say, a take control book, which has bullet lists and bullet lists within bullet lists and different colored headers and all sorts of things, the EPUB format's really not quite up to handling something like that, because EPUB books allow the user to change the font, to change the size, to do all sorts of things. So you can't rely upon a fixed page. And so Pages really can't do the sort of output necessary to do a take control book as an EPUB. At Take Control, we found a way, but we don't do it through Pages. But if you're writing pretty much flowing text that you want to illustrate with pictures and an occasional sound file and a video, it's more than up to the challenge for that. So the next time National Novel Writing Month rolls around and you want to have a little video snip at the beginning of each chapter of the novel that you're going to write, you can do it in Pages and sell it as an ebook at the end of the month.
Good to know. To finalize this, talk a little bit about the process of going from the pre-book to the current version and how the upgrades and how that's all working.
Okay, as a pre-book, we were selling it through one of our partners, a company called LeanPub, which is what we use to generate the ebooks to begin with. And they have their own store. And so if you bought Take Control of Pages in any of its installments, you got free upgrades to the next installment and the one after that and the one after that, all the way up to and including version 1.0. So if anybody had bought Take Control of Pages in pre-book form up to now, you get version 1.0 when it comes out. And that's just a given. I think Adam is still trying to figure out how to deal with the database to make sure everybody gets it. But that's what Take Control is going to do.
Great.
New purchasers buying the 1.0 version, they won't be paying the same price. The pre-book was $15. The final book will be $20 because 266 pages, 188 screenshots. Yeah, 65,000 words. So yeah, $20. However, any Tidbits member gets, a discount. We have Take Control sells these 3-book discounts all the time. If you want to buy 3 Take Control books, you get a third off each of them. So it's not always going to be $20, and we have frequent sales as well. So we have bundles. We have bundles too.
Yes, that goes back to a pre-show discussion that Michael and I were having. Well, I look at this as an essential book if you're serious about getting into Pages and taking full advantage of it. I think there's a lot that you can do if you just sort of stumble in and start playing, and you have some familiarity. And if not, then you can look up things in the help. But if you really want to take control of Pages, this is the book you need. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it.
Well, hey, I've got my Take Control mug right here, so
there you go.
Good to go.
There you go. Michael, it's good to see you. Thanks for walking us through all the chapters and all the capabilities, and maybe having a little bit of a higher level discussion about Pages. It's always interesting. We'll come back and do it again when the next major revision comes out.
Oh God, I hope it's not soon.
What's going to happen.
This was a lot of work.
Oh yeah. I bet it was. Good to see you, my friend. Take care.
You too, Chuck.
Folks, TakeControlBooks.com. That's where you'll find Take Control of Pages, Michael's effort to help you get more out of Apple's desktop publishing, word processing, page layout program. However you want to categorize it, go get Michael's book. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.